You are listening to the new man beyond the macho jerk and the new age wimp. Your host is men's coach Tripp Lanier.
Do you ever wonder if you're on the right path in life? Have you ever wanted to ditch the American dream so you could live on some remote tropical island? And how are we making life more difficult than it already is? Author and world's most interesting man nominee Jaimal Yogis is back to talk about seeking, escaping, and finding the answers to life's big questions. Welcome to The New Man. Today we're talking with Jaimal Yogis. He's the author of several books, including The Saltwater Buddha and The Fear Project. He's written for ESPN, the magazine, as well as many other publications. He's got a great new book out called All Our Waves Are Water, Stumbling Toward Enlightenment and the Perfect Ride. You can learn more about him by visiting JaimalYogis.com. Welcome back to the show, Jaimal.
Thanks, Tripp. It's good to be here.
Yeah, and I want to congratulate you on the new book. I loved it. I sent you an email while I was reading it. I was digging it so much. I love that it was a blend of just being a really great page-turning, entertaining read, but man, there's just a lot of great wisdom in there. I was really fed by it, so I'm digging it. Congratulations.
It means a lot coming from you. I know you read a lot of books.
I get a lot of them, that's for sure. It covers quite a bit of the trek that your life has been on. Just for instance, like as a teenager, you left home, you ran away to Hawaii, you nursed a broken heart and practiced meditation in the Himalayas. You set off to get barreled surfing reef breaks in Indonesia. You tried to find bliss on the beaches of Mexico. You did the college thing in New York and then the professional hustle in DC. As a journalist, you dealt with extremists in the Middle East. And now, currently, you're living the family life with your wife and 3 young boys in San Francisco. But that's just the tip. I mean, the book goes into quite a lot about your journey and the amazing people you've met along the way. I can imagine somebody looking at these adventures and just going, what the hell? I mean, is this guy seeking something or is he running away from something or both? What's your hit on that?
I think all of the above. And I'll just say, the family life with 3 kids is definitely the most intense extreme sport of any of them I've ever done. Which you can probably relate to as a dad.
Yeah.
I think I certainly was running away from something when I ran away from home at 16, and I was, as I was on probation for a DUI. My parents had divorced. I was both kind of dissatisfied with the drama and popularity of contest of high school, and also critical of myself for really being caught up in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wasn't the bad kid, Tripp. I was the one to get caught a lot. So I don't know if I was yearning for something different, maybe unconsciously trying to get caught just to get out of Dodge. But, it was a series of things where I didn't understand the emotions that were coming through about my parents' divorce. I didn't understand why felt like I was in this downward spiral with getting into trouble. But I bounced, as you know, to Maui, one-way ticket. And I was running away from something there. But I think sometimes you got to run away or just break the cycle of the normal routine. I was in Americana suburbia, and I just needed to break that to, I think, begin to have the space to inquire about, the big questions. Mm-hmm. Why am I here? What's the point? What is true contentment, happiness, etc.? And those are the questions I've just continued to ask myself through the various lenses that we use. And I think I took on writing because you get to pick up different lenses.
Mm-hmm.
And you get to, sometimes I'm the journalist getting to interview people like you do, and you get to live their life a little bit. And sometimes, I write memoir because I want to look back at those experiences I've had and say, what did that mean? Let me make sense of this kind of chaos that life feels like sometimes.
Yeah, it seems like there was on one hand you would go deeply down this spiritual path, and then the next thing you know, you're really going deeply into like, okay, I'm going to kick ass as a professional. It seemed like it was tearing you apart for a while, but you somehow made peace with that. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, it's safe to say. I mean, in a lot of ways, I think the reason I've had to write these memoirs, which I never planned on doing, was, so as I was talking about, ran away from home in high school to surf in Maui, ended up coming back, finishing high school, and then when my dad came to get me. And then I went to live in a Zen monastery for a year after high school. I was really infatuated with this notion that you could find peace inside yourself and hop off the hamster wheel. And so I really thought at 19 that I was going to be a monk. And that's a pretty intense experience to go into a monastery for a year and cut yourself off from the world completely. Like, you know, a lot of silence, no relationships, I wasn't seeing myself on a career path at all. It was like I was going to do the monk thing. You do it for life. When I decided not to do that and try college, and you dive back into the world, and it's intense. It's like, you know, shock therapy or something. Like it's so different. And yet I felt like I'd picked up some wisdom in this meditation school, and I wanted to integrate it. You know, the reason the new book is called All Our Waves Are Water is that in Zen, you're really looking at the fact that the nature of enlightenment and the nature of awareness is in all things. Like it's not just in the monastery, it's also at the marketplace. And so how to find that, how to find that in the whir and bustle. And it's challenging. It's challenging because you go in, we live in a society that's told succeed at all costs, and that's going to be your happiness. Where I knew, and I at least had an inkling that there was something bigger, a bigger freedom that you could find inside, and yet I'd chosen to live in the world. And so, it was just trial and error and a lot of falling on my face. And I think because the falling on the face was often the biggest lesson, not getting my grammar right there, but you get my point.
I get it, yeah.
I wrote some of these books to kind of to reflect on, on that process, because it isn't easy to sort of be an urban monk, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's this sense that we can go through life, and if things are difficult, well, I must be on the wrong path. I hear that sometimes, or if things are difficult, then I must not be getting it right. And your book seems to head off these things directly, right? This idea that we can ever be on the wrong path, or that we can be doing things incorrectly. Like, for instance, in our culture, we've got this idea that there's a 4-hour work week, and that's the thing that's going to make us happy, to live on the beach and eat tacos and surf great waves and sleep with a beautiful woman every night. Well, you did this for a while you were in Mexico. You had some version of this, and something was there that kept you from enjoying it. I mean, what happened to you, and what spoiled the fun for you when you were in that part of the path, so to speak?
Well, I think, so yeah, that's a story about, I'd just finished up college, fell for a new woman. We headed to Mexico. I was surfing these great waves, and I had a few months before grad school just to chill like that. And it wasn't that I had a bad time. I mean, that was a great trip. But what I write about in those chapters is really, oftentimes when you have the perfect conditions around you, but you don't yet have full sort of awareness yet, or self-acceptance, or, enlightenment, for lack of a better word, you realize it's almost like the perfect conditions around you can point you to the fact that you're still stewing inside. You're like you get to that, seventh day at the Ritz, and you're just like, everything that goes wrong in your own mind can feel like a bigger deal, because the conditions outside are like, well, look, I have it all. I have what I want. So why the angst?
Right. Why I've got everything. What's wrong with me now?
Right, exactly. And I think ultimately those experiences are really good lessons, because it points you back to the fact that it's not all about the external. You can get all your ducks in a row. You can have the perfect job or be following your passion. You can have the quote right partner. And I think every partner you find you'll find flaws in each other. So those external circumstances are never going to be, they're never going to line up. It's never going to be like game over. It's all easy now. Mm-hmm. And even when you get close to that, sometimes the internal angst becomes even more intense. It's like an opportunity for those things to arise. We thrive off of. We learn from having to use our full potential. And so sometimes, chilling on the beach for 3 months, eating tacos, it's like you can start to also feel like, maybe there's a little more for me out there, and to grow,
Yeah. We like that challenge. I think without it that we start to stagnate. And I know for me, I spent a month in Hawaii one time, and I think about a week and a half in, I started looking for something to break, man. I needed something to fix, It's just like, I'm going to go nuts here. So, I can completely appreciate that. Another expectation that we get, especially if I'm, being in personal development, coaching people in that realm, I meet people who unconsciously believe that the only reason why their life is challenging is because they're not doing something correctly. They believe that if they just learn how to do X, Y, Z better, then it'll be a smooth ride. And in the book, you go over how the Buddha talked about dukkha. Tell us a bit about what dukkha means.
Yeah, dukkha is often translated as suffering, but sort of maybe a mistranslation. The Buddha's first noble truth that he spoke about after his enlightenment was that life is dukkha, life is suffering. But if you look back to the origin of the word, it actually means an axle that doesn't fit into a wheel correctly. So what the Buddha seems to be have been getting at was that life is a bumpy ride, and that no matter rich or poor, we believe in we have attachments, we have desires, and those attachments and desires are bound to let us down. There's going to be ups and there's going to be downs, and so that you just have to expect that. He also said, following that there's a way out of this situation, and the way out of the situation is through practicing mindfulness. And I think that expectation, I think we live in this sort of fairy tale often, and I fall into this a lot as well, where you're working hard and you kind of think that there's going to be, once you get to a certain point, it's going to be easy. Mm. And that expectation sets us up for a lot more suffering because it's like, I've been working hard, man, 20 years, and it's like, it's still not easy. There's always, it's like the next thing comes up, whether it's your own personal health, like, losing a loved one. Sometimes your job's doing great, but something else, the car's breaking down. It's like, it's always imperfect. Yeah. And yet it's those struggles that are, one, juxtapose the high moments and allow us to feel the joys, but also, as we were talking about, it's often those challenges where we really turned on to our full potential, or we're able to feel compassion for somebody else. So I think expecting that life is going to be challenging is sort of like the first step, I think, toward what the Buddha was talking about, where this dukkha or samsara, the cycle of suffering, can actually be the nirvana.
Right. Well, I'm familiar with this first noble truth about, that life is suffering, but this different interpretation of it, and that life is bumpy. It just hit me in the gut. Like, oh, that makes a lot more, it's just something just made it feel a lot more grounded. Like, I just got that a lot easier. And I realized that what caused the suffering is that expectation that everything should be smoother once I get to this point in my life and I'm making X amount, or I've done this, and then it'll smooth out. Like, I'm noticing that I'm waiting for life to get smooth. And that when things are bumpy, that's what creates the suffering. It's like, oh man, are you kidding me? It's bumpy again. And so I just like how it's like, what if we just go in and we understand, like, yeah, shit's going to be bumpy. Like, this is just how life is. It's just the axle just doesn't quite fit in the wheel quite right, and let go of it. Like, there you go. Like, then you'll find your peace in that if you can just start to learn how to accept that. But I find that I'm most miserable when I'm unwilling to accept that life's going to be bumpy. And so I just love that interpretation. I thought that was powerful.
Yeah, so much is lost in translation, and I was pretty that different translation helped me a lot too. And I'll just tack on to that there's a great surfing metaphor in that, because it's like, well, it's not fun to surf if you don't have the bumps, and sometimes the sea is stormy, and those days are rough, but it's going to get calm again. So I guess it's the bumps can also be fun. Yeah. Metaphor.
Yeah, I used to have those days where I was like, God, it's blowing again, man. It's just blowing. It's like, well, that's what makes the swell. So, deal with it. Yeah. Part of it. You talked about mindfulness a minute ago. One of the other things that you brought up in the book, you brought up this story that the Buddha tells about what happens when we're shot with an arrow. And he says, I'm going to paraphrase what you wrote, but that the run-of-the-mill person when he gets shot, he sorrows and he grieves and he laments. He beats his breast. He becomes distraught. He feels two pains, not just the physical one, but the mental one as well. He feels the pains of two arrows. And so, but the person who's trained in mindfulness, when that person's shot with an arrow, he feels only the physical pain. He doesn't add some kind of a story to it. He doesn't make it about him or how life's unfair or wonder why life has been so hard to him. The bottom line is that life hurts. Of course it hurts, but we don't need to add to that pain. Just how do you see us, or how do you add pain to your own life? Like, let's just go into that, because I don't know if people realize that what we're experiencing is most of the time isn't so much the pain of the situation, but the shit that we're adding on top of it.
Oh man, it's just, if I had a nickel for every time I found myself spinning my wheels about this, I can get into a thing where on the weekends when the kids are just moody and, they're throwing tantrums. My wife wanted to have more children than I did. I was like good at two, I was like, I come from a family of I have one sibling. I was like four, it's a round number. Now we have three, right? She came from three and she's like, we can do it. But then when it's like, so I'll start getting in this time, like, did this to me, and it's like, I can even laugh at myself in the moment of like, that's ridiculous. You were part of this as well. Like, take some responsibility. But it's funny how we want to, it's hard when your 3-year-old. A developmental psychologist has told me that 3-year-olds have basically the brain structure of a sociopath. And so they can just go on when they're having a hard day. It just makes no sense. And you can try all different angles and you're just like, this is still hard. And yet, if I can kind of so when I'm in the funk and I'm like complaining about it, I use little tricks like trying to take a meta perspective of just look at my life on the whole, like be grateful. You're going to look back on this and say, these were the days, young, like it was so full and, now they're teenagers and they don't want to even see their dad. It's like, you can play some little games like that with yourself. But I find like gratitude for the things I have can really turn that around. And then also accepting the fact that you're not beating myself up for being a complainer. Like, I'm complaining about this in my head. It's hard. And then I'll basically add the second arrow of like, and you shouldn't be complaining about this.
Right. Yeah, that's what creates the spiral of, you dick. Oh, look at you being a dick to yourself. Oh, there you go again. You're being just piles on.
Right. It's like the third arrow. And really the first arrow is the initial thing, like, hey, your 3-year-old's having a tantrum. You're tired too. Leave it at that. It's like, okay, this is all expected part of life.
Right. What did you wrote something in the book about how one of them was, like you said, the last time you were angry was this morning when one of them tried to put the other one in the toilet or something and just left out. Like, okay, there's the first pain, right?
Right. But it's amazing. I mean, when I've been, say when I get off of a mindfulness retreat and I've cleared through the cobwebs a little bit and I'm more responding to just things as they are. It's like, oh, one kid is hitting the other. I say like, hey guys, stop hitting. You don't like to be hit. And there's just not as much emotion in it. And then once the cobwebs build up and it's more about me and how I'm feeling, it's like, hey, you guys, like,
right.
What is with you? It's like I'm adding all of this other like emotion that's about my fatigue or my thing that's, where I just want to be, go out for a surf. And it's, we add a lot and we take it out on each other, which then adds third and fourth and fifth arrows.
Right.
And, so when you go back to your practice and you just breathe, and it's like, then you can get a little closer to just saying, okay, it's painful, it's a big deal,
Well, I like that you brought in the practice there because that's that element where most guys are like, oh, I can't get to that because I got all these things to do. They don't realize that the practice is what helps them show up most powerfully, no matter what they're committed to, whether it's family or their profession or whatever it is. There's this thing like, yeah, I can't do this other thing that actually has me show up best in the world yet. And so they don't see that they become a liability to themselves or their family or whatever when they put their practice on the back burner or they just forget it altogether. So I'm glad you brought that in and to help us see like, oh yeah, if I'm really committed to being a great father, a great husband, or a great, whatever it is that I do in the world, then I put my practice first because that's going to take my shit out of the way, essentially. I'm going to be lowering that, that probability. It's just another reminder how important that is.
Yeah, I think that's well put, because it's usually when we're most busy and feeling like we can't take that time, that then, you're trying to check all the boxes, but you start losing the ability to, one, prioritize and just see things clearly, but two, you can be adding a lot of unnecessary tasks that happen through unnecessary reactions, because again, it's like you're adding the second and third arrows. And so I find, or you start, you get embroiled in an emotional drama at work or something, a political thing where you don't necessarily need to. And it's like the practice is what allows you to just be like, okay,
not important.
That's not essential, not important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This isn't it. Most of us get in this downward spiral once we start to compare ourselves to others, right? And nowadays, everybody's putting their highlight reel online with whatever Facebook or Instagram or whatever kind of bullshit we've got up there. It's not all bullshit, but it's just easy to project this air of where, oh man, I'm not doing as much as this guy. I'm falling behind that person. I should be doing more in my life. You were working on your first book. You were getting ready to send it off to the publisher or your editor, and you found this other. You started comparing yourself to this other author, and tell us what happened then.
I was about 26 and didn't really think I would be working on a book at that point. And it was my first book, and so I'd spent the better part of a year just losing money, pouring my heart out on the page, ready to send it in. I'd actually gotten the okay from the publisher that just make some small changes. And in the process, I picked up a really renowned author, this guy, Tim Winton, from Australia, who's, won every accolade there is in the literary world. But he has a very different style. It's like he has a different voice. He's a different human being. But I instantly got into that. I got triggered. Same way you can get triggered on Facebook being like, hey, it's like Joe from high school. He's got a lot of likes on his page. It's like all of a sudden you're dissatisfied with what a second ago seemed just fine,
Right.
And nothing, once you're emotionally triggered like that, it can trigger a bunch of other insecurities, and you're not really sure like where the original, where all this emotion is coming from. But in my case, I couldn't recognize that I was triggered. I just saw that I needed to change my book a lot. And I actually went in and basically rewrote the book.
And this was after the editor said it was good, like they were happy with how it was. And then you decided, no, I need to rewrite it so it sounds more like this other guy.
Yeah. And, that wasn't my process of like, I need to get back to him, but it was like, I need it to be better. I need it to be, but because it was the insecurity driving it, what ended up happening was I wrote a draft that it lost power, because it wasn't, I'd poured my heart onto the page. I'd written something authentic. And then I was basically trying to hide in a way from stacking up, different types of sentence structures or a more cynical worldview that I thought would be accepted by, the literary reviewers. It was hiding. And it's something that I think we all do in just basic communication. We can try to be someone else because we see someone else's style or voice getting accepted by the zeitgeist. And anyway, I didn't know I was doing that. Sent it in, and I was feeling like this is really going to knock their socks off. And they were just like, "We don't, this doesn't feel like you. Like, what happened?" Basically.
Right.
And I went through a pretty intense period where I said, I was going to quit writing. I told them I'm giving back the advance. I'm not going to publish the book. And so that rolled on for a few months until, and what basically happened, I don't want to give away the whole story, but what basically happened was I had to sort of a series of friends, reminding me of things, pick up the manuscript and read it as if I was picking it up at the store and it wasn't mine. And so to really look at, because we're often so much more judgmental of ourselves, than we would be of someone else. Like someone else might be going through some drama, or feeling, maybe they got a bad review or something. And you're just like, hey man, I know you, this isn't a big deal. This is a blip on the in the big picture. But when it's about us, we're like, no, man,
it really matters. This is so
my
important.
life is over. And, and so, I just needed that distance. I needed to, when you've been in a book that long, it can be like a bad relationship, and you just need to take some time apart. And I came back and I read it, and I was like, hey, if I was coming to this book as, Joe Schmo at the store, I picked this up. I might not say it's going to win a Pulitzer, but this is a good book.
Cool.
I picked up the original version, I should say, the one that was pre-changed. And then I finally, thankfully went back to the publisher and I said, hey, you guys were right.
Good.
That original version was better.
Well, I like that you named it for what it was. It was just hiding. Here you are, you're this close to the finish line. You're this close to putting yourself out there. That's the vulnerable process. This is where the dream can be destroyed, right? Or, that's what our mind thinks. It's a lot easier to be a legend in your own mind, instead of actually putting stuff out there and seeing how it actually works. And that we'll find, I think resistance is so profound in how seductive it is to find a reason to hold back. Well, it needs to be more of this, it needs to be less that, instead of like, well, here's my voice and this is the book and I'm putting it out and then I'll write the next one. And so I just wonder, like, for most authors that are wanting to write a book and just have it magically sell and let the awards and the money and the fame roll in, they want to avoid that process. And I'm curious what's going on for you now as you're releasing this book. What's life like for you now? Talking in this book, talking about equanimity and talking about expectations, and then are you immune from this these days, or how does it show up for you as you're getting ready to roll this book out?
Yeah, well, since I'm enlightened now, I don't feel jealousy.
That's the next book, right? How to $10 and you can be enlightened too, right?
Yeah, come to my weekend retreat. It's only $15,000. Writing that story, and this is part of why I think I do these books, is like I remind myself that I went through that, because I know I'm going to go through it again.
Yeah.
Now I've been able to recognize my cycle. Like I came out with the Fear Project. I realized that once when I'm editing, writing a book is hard, and you kind of wanting to get to the finish line. And so like your editor's giving you feedback and then putting it together, and you're basically like, yes, okay, I think I'm there. And then, you dot the I's and cross the T's, and then it's coming out. I realized when I get to that point where I can't change it anymore, and it's coming out, then if I go back and read it, I all of a sudden will see everything that's wrong with it.
Oh, yeah. Right.
And I'll basically be like, because you're on lockdown now, like the book's coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll go into the harshest critic mode, and I'll just say, this is awful. Why did I not see all these things wrong with it? And of course, no book is perfect. Nothing you do, everything could always be tweaked, made a little different, And so with the Fear Project, that started happening again, and I was really hard on myself, but I could start to recognize the patterns. And here, I am coming out with this book. Sure enough, the same emotions come up, and you just get a little better at recognizing it. It's like the bumps become a little smaller.
Mm-hmm.
So you catch yourself. You're like, I'm not going to fall for that story. Like I've been down that road. The first time it took me 3 months. The second time it took me a month. And now it's like, no, I can kind of see it arise as it comes. And in this book, I think because my dad was dying while I was writing it, I had this perspective of like, we don't have forever.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to be on your deathbed saying, I hedged. I didn't lay it all on the line. I didn't leave it all in the court. So with this book, I pushed myself to do that, to not wear a mask. And so I think because of that, I feel less of that. Like, of course I want it to do well. I want it to be loved, but if it isn't, I think I feel like I said my piece.
Right.
And I can feel good about that.
There is a satisfaction in that of like, okay, especially if you've got kids, right? Like, it's just like, all right, they're going to read this one day, perhaps when I'm gone. What do I want them to read? What do I want them to remember? Like, oh, this was Dad's work. This is what he cared about. And instead of like, oh, look at all the research Dad did.
Right.
That's the game that I play with myself. When I'm wanting to hide or I'm wanting to hold back or whatever it might be, I just tap into that, and it helps me. It helps me get out of my own way. It also helps to just remember good enough is good enough, and that this is going to be one of 1,000 things that I'm going to do. And we're not talking about just writing a book here. This is anything that we really want to do that's outside of our comfort zone. Just letting go of this thing that it's got to be perfect and it's got to be just right and safe and certain before we jump in. I just see this over and over again, where good enough is good enough, and then keep going. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and you'll get better as you go. And this process is still challenging, but you start to learn the game. You get a little bit better at it as you go.
Yeah, I think that's really well put. They're all, it's kind of lily pads, and perfect can be the enemy of the good. And you're going to get criticized, if you're doing something that takes risks and where there's potential for failure. That's where it's scary, and that's where also you leave yourself open to get criticized, and you will. But I like to go back and look at all the brilliant books or pieces of music or something that just got torn apart
right.
by critics.
Right.
You can go back from Leaves of Grass to Where the Wild Things Are, and just read these reviews. It's like, I love this one of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. It's like, it's no fault of Whitman's that he wrote this book, but it is his fault for not burning it and committing suicide afterwards. It's just like, this is one of our great. And so it's like people are gonna say shit. They're gonna say this is go home, nice try, and that's okay. You just got to be ready.
Well, it's like you said, how do you want to play, right? Oh, well, at least I avoided getting a bad review from that guy. Like, is that really what you want to say on your deathbed? It's like, I don't.
Right.
I don't want to play the game of life to avoid a possible snarky remark from somebody. It's just too short. And
right.
Gosh, you reminded me. I'm reading Robert Plant's from Led Zeppelin, his biography right now, and just like they were like playing and people just didn't get it early on. I was like, how did you go see that band and not freaking get it? They were so powerful. It's like they didn't get it. Like, it just was like, so what? So it's just you think they come out of the gate and it just set everything on fire, and it didn't. So I just appreciate that. I
mean, and I notice you can even start to forget yourself, like how much hustle it took to get to where you are. You can be like, we have a sort of revisionist history where we're like, oh, now it's kind of hard for me, but look at that, success that I had when I was 25 or whatever. And then you're like, no, actually there was a lot of steps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can kind of glaze over the fact, like my wife does when she was talking about having a third child. She's like, it hasn't been that hard. And I was like, no, remember actually.
Yeah.
But anyway, for the record, I'm very glad that we have.
Yeah, I get it. I remember reading, I was going through a dark night of the soul for several years, and I remember reading some book, and this guy alluded to it, and then for the next years, I went through the darkest period of my life. Next chapter, he just, I was like, I need that. Like, what did you do? How did you get through that? And he was like, yeah, but that was 30 years ago. I can't remember that. And I was like, oh God, I need that story. That would help me. And even now, when I look back on that period, I just gloss over it. It's easy to just gloss over that stuff. As you said, we revise our history. So, I love this book. If you're listening, we're just scratching the surface of all the cool stories and the great wisdom in here. Jaimal Yogis, All Our Waves Are Water, Stumbling Toward Enlightenment and the Perfect Ride. You're on a book tour right now. Where can we come see you? Tell us about where you're going to be.
I'm going to be up and down the East and West Coast in July. At a bunch of my favorite bookstores, Powell's, Book Passage, Warwick's in San Diego, and then over by you on the East Coast in Charlotte and New York and Orlando. And so, you can go on my website, JaimalYogis.com, to see the date.
Beautiful.
Excited about that.
All right. All Our Waves Are Water. Go get it. I loved it. Thanks so much, and looking forward to the next one, man.
Thanks, Tripp.
If these interviews are helping you, then please visit The New Man on iTunes and leave us a positive review so others can discover the show more easily. Thanks for listening.